Hello, everyone. My name is Harvey Brownstone, and today I'm delighted to welcome a true Hollywood legend. She dazzled us with her performances in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, Funny Face, Witness for the Prosecution, Marjorie Morningstar, and Operation Eichmann. She's had feature roles in hundreds of TV shows from Perry Mason to Power Rangers, Twilight Zone, Murder, She Wrote, Hogan's Heroes, Love Boat, Roseanne, many, many more. And of course, she co-hosted on NBC's High Rollers with Alex Trebek. She's received dozens of accolades and awards for her philanthropy, especially for her leadership role in the Thalians, a charitable organization dedicated to mental health. And most recently, she's written a fascinating memoir called Consider Your Ass Kissed, chronicling her 7-decade career in Hollywood. She's the beautiful, the glamorous, the incomparable Ruta Lee. Miss Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Miss Lee, my foot, Harvey. It's Ruta, and you know it. And oh, how delighted I am to be with you. Thank you so much for the lovely invitation, and I cherish the time we're going to have together with all of your listeners and viewers.
Well, as you know, our show is filmed in Canada, and so it's a special honor to have you here, Ruta, because you were born in Montreal and lived in Canada until you moved to the States at the age of 13. Do you have happy memories of your Canadian childhood?
Oh, absolutely. The beginnings of my career were in kindergarten at the age of 3, I guess, and I owe my whole career to Mrs. Jackson, who ran the kindergarten school that I went to, because she said to my mother, Mary, your daughter is different from all of the other children I have in my kindergarten classes. She's a precocious child. Give her music lessons, give her dance lessons, give her whatever lessons you feel you can afford. And God bless my mother, who didn't listen to my father, who used to say, oh, she lazy, she don't do nothing, you know. Anyway, she gave me the lessons, and thank God for Mrs. Jackson and my mom. I owe any success I've ever had in this life to that darling lady. Both my parents were Lithuanian, born, raised, married. Everybody wanted to come to the United States where the streets were paved with gold. My father couldn't get into the US at the time. The quotas had been closed. So, of course, where did they go? Next door to the United States, which was the wonderful country of Canada, which was very good to my parents. And he got a job working in the wheat fields of Saskatchewan. And then after a year, he saved enough money to bring my mother over. And I was eventually born and went to school there as a child. And everything that I did started, of course, being Lithuanian. We were Catholic. Started on the stage at the church hall. You know, the first tap dance or anything that I ever did was there. Then, of course, there were the amateur shows and the boardwalk shows and all of that things that happened in Montreal. There's a picture of me in the book that shows me holding in my tightly clutched fist the $10 that I won, which I think first prize. And that was the start of my career, the first money I made. The church never paid me, but the amateur shows on occasion gave you a few dollars.
So, Ruta, I have to tell you, I loved your book. It's jam-packed with so many wonderful memories and anecdotes. I read it in 2 days. I couldn't put it down. But the obvious question is, why did it take you so long to write this fabulous book?
I'll tell you why, because I was scared to death to sit down and try to do anything. First of all, you read my book, you know, I failed typing 4 times. And they finally kicked me out of the typing class and sent me to shop in high school. And so I couldn't imagine, even with the computer, ever having to do this. So a very good friend, a very good PR man out of Texas, Barry Rogers, said, Ruta, your stories are so good. Whenever you come on television or do whatever, interesting stories that we all love hearing, you really need to do a book. And I said, yeah. And he said, I will come for several weekends in a row and we will tape what you have to say. So what did I do? I taped stories. I taped adventures. I taped happenings. I taped things about people that I knew and loved. And he recorded everything. Of course, along with those recordings, he recorded every burp, every telephone ring, every dog bark, and everything else also got printed. So there was quite a bit of editing to do, but thank God when our book editors, Britain Publishing, took a look, they didn't change anything, which is a frigging miracle, Harvey. It's a miracle. And it went in more or less the way it is. And I think I've been asked about what's been the most rewarding thing you've heard from your readers. And that is, and maybe you'll agree with this, that most people said that it was exactly like sitting down and having a cocktail with me and having me talk about my life, and that my voice and what I had to say and the inflections got translated somehow into the black and white on a page. So I'm very, very grateful for that happening, and for whatever guardian angels inspired me to finally get my fanny in gear and do it.
Oh, you know, I couldn't agree more. It really did feel like I was sitting down with you and I could hear your voice through those words. I know everybody wants me to ask you how you came up with that title, but should we keep them in suspense and make them buy the book to find out, or do you want to give them a hint?
Well, in both cases, it applies any way you look at it. You probably all know George Pinocchio, who is ABC's television reporter, Hollywood reporter. And he does all the red carpet, you know, all the major awards. And he's like a kid in my family. He and his wife, she does my clothes for me. Years ago, he said, Ruta, if you ever actually sit down and get that book put together, it has to be only one title, and that is Consider Your Ass Kissed. And why? Because it's an expression that I've used ever since I think I started talking, and that is, with the deepest gratitude and the deepest respect and deepest love and honor to anybody that has turned on a television set because I was going to be on, that bought a movie ticket because I was in it, that bought a theater ticket because I was performing, or that gave me money for my charity, the Thalians. Debbie Reynolds and I, as you know, Harvey, were the head mamas of this charity for 60 years. These lovely people, right from the stage, I would say from the bottom of my heart, please consider your ass kissed, meaning with full respect and full gratitude. And that's how I feel about anybody that will even pick up the book and leaf through it. The pictures are kind of wonderful, aren't they, Harvey? They're a real amalgam of Hollywood history.
I think the whole book is wonderful. And I don't know if you believe in karma, but I love the fact that your star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame is located right in front of the box office at Grauman's Chinese Theater, where you were fired for being a few dollars short at the end of your shift. That must have felt wonderful.
I can't tell you. Talk about serendipity or God's blessing, you know? It's just astounding how life turns. And I remember when I got fired, because I loved being an usherette there. I think most of your listeners and viewers are probably too young to even know what an usherette was. But in the olden days, there were ushers or usherettes that led you down with a flashlight to a seat that you wanted to sit in, put you in a good place. And I loved standing at the top of the aisle, waiting for someone else to come in and watching the screen queens, you know, Betty Grable, June Haber, Mitzi Gaynor, Ethel Merman, all doing their stuff and standing there saying, oh, please, God, let me do that. Please, God, let me do that. Please, God, let me do that, you know. And then I got hired or pushed up in scale. It meant a little more money too, to be candy girl at the candy counter. But Harvey, math has always been my big failing. When I was back in school in Montreal, I failed one whole year because of like 6 points short on my tests. Math was never my long suit, but I could handle 5 cents, 10 cents, 20 cents, 50 cents, whatever, you know, the candies were and the popcorn. Then one night the cashier got sick and I had to replace the cashier. Well, that was a disaster. In spite of the fact that they said, you punch in 2 tickets at $1.98, and then you punch in $5 and it'll give you the right change. Well, we were $40 short, and I got fired. And I sat there in tears saying, I did not steal the money. I'm just lousy in math, and you shouldn't have put me in this job, and blah, 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 blah. And then to find that it was absolutely serendipitous that my star was directly in front of the box office from which I got fired was my going, ha, 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 ha.
Big time.
Big time. And then to stop and think that my darling Alex Trebek was a speaker at my event, as was Debbie Reynolds. Wow, an all-star, beautiful event. And in fact, the aforementioned Mitzi Gaynor was one of my wonderful stars at the event. In fact, I think I have a picture in the book of her and Buzz Aldrin, yes, at my star.
Well, you've worked with pretty much every major star in Hollywood, including the Rat Pack when you played the female lead in Sergeants 3. Did you have a favorite member of the Rat Pack?
Well, of course, it would have to be Frank Sinatra, because it was he that was responsible for my, without his knowing, and you'll have to read this in the book, everybody, but it was because of Frank Sinatra that I got to be Tyrone Power's secret love in Witness for the Prosecution, which, by the way, along with Seven Brides, are 2 of the Critics' Choice top 100 films ever made. So even though I had minor roles in them, considering they were not starring roles, I am proud to say that I was in 2 of the top pictures ever made. So that's very good. But Frank was responsible for my getting that job, and then not knowing, when he was screening movies at home with friends, he said, you know, I've been watching that Ruta Lee chick, and what say we put her up in one of our upcoming movies? And that's how I got to be his leading lady. So, wow. Like I said, God works in mysterious ways.
Well, I wonder whether you realize how really good you were. You know, the charisma, the beauty, the charm. It wasn't just good luck. You have talent.
I have talent. I have great work ethic. I love working, and I love to have a hell of a good time while I'm working. And I think that's one of the reasons I work so much. Why I never reached superstardom, I don't know. But then again, my husband was the first to say that if Ruta had spent 10% of the time on her career that she spent on her do-good activities, whether it was the Thalians or the Cancer Society, wherever, that she could have told Barbara Streisand to get off the world. And maybe he's right. But you know something, Harvey? I've made a living, a very nice living, all these 60, 70 years in the business. And I have always worked, never been for very long without a job, which is not something that most actors can say. And maybe it's because I did it all. I talked and walked, I sang, I danced. And you know what was really the most lucrative few years of my career, Harvey? Was the 5 years that I spent on Home Shopping Network as a celebrity guest salesperson.
Really?
Wow. Well, yeah, I had a great product that my husband had found, spray vitamins. And so it was just great. And I had a very nice financial deal. And they were very, very good to me. And I loved it. And oh, I would do that again. You know what was interesting, Harvey? That with a hello, how are you? You got to say hello to millions of viewers who were meeting me as Ruta Lee, not as a character that I was playing. So I'm very, very grateful to Home Shopping Network. I'm especially grateful to the game shows and the talk shows that introduced me to North America and South America and Europe as Ruta Lee, not as a character.
Well, you know, Ruta, when I look at your career, I'm amazed at your versatility, especially on television. You were on Perry Mason 5 times. You played very serious roles. You were in numerous westerns, including Bonanza, Gunsmoke, Rawhide. You did comedy on Hogan's Heroes, The Andy Griffith Show. I loved you on The Lucy Show and Gomer Pyle. You even appeared as yourself on numerous game shows. What do you think it is about you that made you so easy to cast in so many different kinds of roles?
Well, first of all, I think my love of energy, my love of working, my great energy, I think transmits, whether it's on screen or where it transmits the most, Harvey, I've got to tell you, is on stage. You know, I have a thing about grasping everybody in the audience and pulling them into what I'm doing. But I also think that perhaps my reputation as being very easy to work with, not a pain in the ass like some performers get to be a little highfalutin about themselves. I always had a very strong work ethic, which meant do your work, do it well, but enjoy the hell out of it while you're doing it, you know, which was really fun. So the minute the camera was off, the jokes would fly, and I enjoyed that very much. I also was able to do a lot of different things. I could play hookers with a heart of gold and teeth to match, or I could also play the sweet young mother who was lost her child, or whatever the case may be. Or I could do a drug addict, or I could do a society girl. I think I write about this in the book. In fact, one time, a producer that I worked for a lot, Jaime Del Valle, who did the original lineup, he called me one day and he said, how's your tennis game? And I sort of panicked and said, because I didn't play tennis. I sort of said, and he said, good, fine, come on up, because you're going to be playing a tennis player Monday. And so come on up to San Francisco and I'll see you there. Before I got there, I panicked. So I called Tony Trabert, great tennis pro. And I said, would you do me a great kindness? Please, I'll reciprocate whatever way I can. Teach me how to play tennis overnight. Well, I worked at it for a couple of days, and he had the patience to hang out there with me and teach me how to do this. Now I get to San Francisco, and I'll be damned. I pick up the script and it says, the ball is lobbed over to Jenny, who attempts to hit it and falls flat on her face. Oh. Tony Trabert and I spent the whole bloody weekend teaching me to play tennis, and I didn't have to. But Tony Trabert was a sweetheart. So wherever you are, Tony, consider your ass kissed.
But you know, the thing about you that everyone knew in Hollywood is that you showed up, you knew your lines, you were a real pro.
You know, I worked with somebody recently. I won't mention names, basically because I've already forgotten her name. But I've never seen that kind of non-professional BS that I saw. And I said, if this is what the new kind of approach to shooting is, and the director was a little haphazard about everything. And I don't know if they were high on stuff or whether they were just irresponsible people, but I thought, oh my God, they would have gotten nowhere in the good old days when your work really meant that you knew your work and you did it. And you know, very honestly, Harvey, in those days when I first started, you know, in the late 50s and through the 60s and the 70s and even into the 80s, casting directors really meant something, and they held great sway and great power, because the producers and directors knew that these guys had seen every little theater production with everybody new possible in it, had seen every television show that everybody was shooting, movies, and knew who was up and coming, who could do the work, got all the info on everybody. And they would call or talk to the directors and say, do you want a blonde, a brunette, or a redhead for this? And one of those three were probably somewhat similar in attitude or character, and it depended on what the director or producer wanted. And they'd call and say, okay, are you available on such and such such a day to do this and this, and if you're available, fine. If not, the redhead would get it, you know? And it was so much easier. Well, at the very beginning, of course, everybody has to go through readings and so on and so forth. But now, Harvey, I've got to tell you, and I am not lying, it could be one word or one line that is pivotal to a scene, and they'll have people with credentials that the producers don't have come in and read. And it's insane. It's nice because all of us who know each other get to visit a little bit, you know, while we're sitting there waiting to go in. But I just loved how Shelley Winters one time sat down at a desk in front of one of these schmucks with, you know, the baggy, the tears in the knees of the jeans and feet up on the floor, you know, a 25-year-old producer kid. And when he said, well, Miss Winters, what have you done? She pulled her Oscar out of her bag, put it on the desk and said, "You next."
I love that.
Tell me what you, isn't that great?
It is
Isn't
great.
that just great?
You know, one of my favorite roles you did on TV was in the Twilight Zone in an episode entitled "A Short Drink from a Certain Fountain." Now that episode is now a cult classic. Did you know at the time that you were making something really special?
No, of course I didn't. I knew that it was a special show for me because I got to play this little tramp, and tramps and tarts are so much more fun to play than good girls, you know that. And so I loved her. I just loved her. And I loved working with Patrick O'Neill, who was a marvelous actor. And we had a wonderful director. And something very nice happened to me on that shoot. It was done at MGM, which was kind of like home to me because I did a lot of growing up there doing Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And then later I did a movie called Gabby with Leslie Caron. And I did a lot of stuff at MGM. And after one of the scenes, applause came, which has happened on other sets, you know, with heavy duty themes. But a lot of applause and a cheer went up. And I looked up into the catwalks, you know, where the guys are with all the lights that are shining down on you and adjusting them. And one of the guys yelled down, "We love you, Ruta. You remind us of Carol Lombard, who was our favorite." And I thought, wow, that's one of the greatest compliments of my life. And what a sweet moment that was for me.
I never thought of that, but they're right, Ruta. You do.
In some ways, there's that blonde kind of look. I unfortunately never got to sleep with Clark Gable.
Well, it's his loss. It was his loss.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree.
You know, Ruta, we lost Alex Trebek last year. You co-hosted High Rollers with him for 2 years. Do you have any special memories of Alex that you could share with us?
I have continuing memories because we were good buddies. I don't mean that we saw each other every day, but we saw each other at least once or twice a month. He always lived no more than a mile and a half away from me in Laurel Canyon in Hollywood, where I live. And we traveled a lot together. His first wife, Elaine, who, by the way, was one of the Playboy bunnies. So, you know, she was a very pretty girl. We all became, my husband and I and we became very close friends, and we'd see each other for supper and whatnot all the time. And then when they split, this is very interesting. I don't know of it happening anywhere but in Hollywood. Alex was the one that walked Elaine up the aisle to her now husband, Peter Karras. Isn't that interesting? He was the father of the bride. The ex-husband took her to the new husband. I thought that was about as chic as you could get. And just wonderful. And then I fell madly in love with his later to-be wife, Jeannie. And Jeannie and Elaine and Alex and Peter and I and Webb were best friends. And we all hung out together and we'd have dinner together. In fact, I'd say about 5 days before Alex died, we all, without my husband now who had died, We all had dinner together, and it was our kind of our last hurrah together, which was very, very special. His wife is still the most beautiful creature. He always married pretty girls.
And smart.
Very smart. And you know what else nobody knows about him? In fact, I may say something about this in the book. I don't remember. He was of somewhat Russian descent. The Trebek, I imagine, was Trebetskoy or something at some point. But he was from Sudbury, you know, in Ontario. His father was of Russian background, and therefore there was that strong work ethic and the ability that seems to be innate in people of Eastern European descent, and that is to be able to do or fix anything, whether it's plumbing or carpentry or plastering or cement work. They know how to do it. And Alex did know how to do it. And not only did he know how to do it, but he bought out our local hardware store when it was going out of business. So he had every frigging tool imaginable. So if ever you needed something, you call Alex and say, I need a wrench that has a 3-inch blah, blah, and he'd have it.
Ruta, you've done some really heroic things in your life that a lot of people may not know about. In 1964, you made international headlines when you called Soviet Premier Khrushchev and begged him to pardon your grandmother, who'd been in an internment camp in Siberia since World War II. The pardon was granted, and your grandmother came to live with you in California until she died 2 years later. That is truly remarkable, Ruta. I'm in awe.
Don't be in awe. Let me tell you that it took more than chutzpah to do that. It took a lot of wine to do it. I had tried for some 12 years because I was the first to become a citizen of the United States. My parents were still on the Lithuanian immigration visa status. And I did what we called vizovs, which are invitations that had to be written in Russian, in Lithuanian, and in English. And the vizov basically said, my dear grandmama, and with BS words, I wouldn't want you to be a burden to your family, and you're getting old now and your health is not good, and you will be a burden to your family or the state, and I will take the full responsibility to bring you where the climate is warm, you know, that kind of stuff. And this had to be notarized. All 3 pages now notarized, that had to be approved by the state seal. So it went to Sacramento. That got more ribbons on all 3 pages. Then it went from the state to the State Department in Washington, and more seals. So now this is a 1-pound package. And you send it to the Soviet Union. The local commissar takes a look at it and goes, "Nyat," and it's over with. Now I have to start all over again because in 6 months it expires. So I did this for 12 years, continually doing it. And eventually she was permitted to return to Lithuania when her time in Siberia was over. Now, why was she in Siberia? I don't know. She and my grandfather, who maybe had a chamber pot to pee in, maybe not. They certainly maybe had a goat, maybe not, that would separate them from anybody else. But they were poor, poor peasants. My mother literally carried her shoes with her to church before she put them on because they had to be passed down to the next daughter. They couldn't afford to keep buying shoes. What the hell did the Soviet Union want them in Siberia for? And I assumed that it was when they were trying to repatriate Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Germany, you know, all of the places with communists, rather than the people, the nationals, take away their national pride. That's the only thing we can ever imagine. But anyway, we got a letter from her thanking us for everything we had sent to Siberia and to Lithuania. At that time, you could send packages, a pound of this, a pound of that, a pound of something. And we got word that she was dying. She never learned to read or write. She never went to school. So my aunt was writing for her. And when we got the letter, my mother was in a spate of tears. We didn't know if she was alive or dead because Everything had big, broad black marks through it, you know. It was just terrible. They were so discriminating of what could be said, what couldn't be said. And I went out with friends that night, and they kept pouring wine to make me feel better, because I was truly inconsolable at that point. I said, my God, 12 years I've spent doing this, and I don't know if she's alive or dead or what, you know. And so the more wine they poured, the more obvious it became that I should do something extraordinary. And what was that but pick up the damn phone and call Khrushchev. So in a slightly drunken haze, I called Khrushchev at about 1 a.m. in Los Angeles, trying to make it match up with work hours in the Soviet Union in Moscow. And I placed a call to Nikita Khrushchev, Kremlin, Moscow, USSR. And that bitch telephone operator said, how do you spell Khrushchev? Well, long story short, it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with the Russian operator and the American operator. Russian always, niet, 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 no, no speak it, no in office, no, not possible, you know, that whole thing. In the meantime, I was calling the Russian embassy in Washington, trying to see if I could get any results there, because I wanted to go to Lithuania. And you couldn't go to Lithuania. Maybe if you were a very high Communist Party official, they would let you in. But beyond that, none of those satellite countries could have visitors from the US. So I wasn't getting anywhere there either. I spoke to the gardener, I spoke to the dishwasher, I spoke to the upstairs maid. Niet, 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 from the Russian embassy in Washington. Finally, they called me back and said, Mr. Khrushchev, no speak it English. You speak it with interpreter, Warchomsky. I said, yes, because I remembered he was the very handsome man that traveled with him when he was here banging his shoe on the podium and uttering rather rude Russian words, which my father understood fluently, to us Americans, and the translator was changing them to make it palatable to our Victorian ears. And he said, Miss Lee, we know all about you here. We see your movies and we're delighted to talk to you. What can I do for you? And I said, I want to come. I want to bring my mother and father. And I want permission to bring them, because the State Department had said to me, don't ever take your parents because they could be detained as primary citizens of the Soviet, having been born there. I said, I want to take my mother and father, and I don't know if my grandmother is alive. And he said, well, talk to your congressman. And I said, what the hell does my congressman have to do with my traveling in your country? This is not political. This is a matter purely of the heart. I don't know if my grandmother is alive. If she is, I'll find her. If she isn't, maybe I can make it to her funeral. And if she's not either one, then maybe I'll just go to her gravesite. And he said, present yourself again to the Russian embassy in Washington. And I thought, oh, Christ. Here we go again. This time I'm going to talk to the downstairs maid. This time I was automatically put in touch on the first call to the first secretary, a very, very high position. And the first secretary was Lithuanian. And I'm fluent in Lithuanian. And long story, just a little shorter. 48 hours later, we were all on a Pan Am flight on our way to Moscow and then back to Lithuania. And my grandmother had been miraculously moved from the little shack that she lived in up on the Baltic Sea down to a hospital by fancy ambulance in Kaunas, where we found her. And you can imagine what kind of a reunion this was. First time in 35 years that my folks got to see any of their family members. And she was my one remaining grandparent. And I got eventually, 6 months later, her health wasn't good enough to travel with us then, but they pulled her together somehow. And 6 months later, I went back and got her. And that's a long story also. and brought her back to the United States. And, you know, to her, America, be it north or south or the middle, was heaven. She'd always dreamed of being in America. And Harvey, when she stepped off that plane, didn't have jetways then. She stepped off the stairs of the plane, dropped to her knees on the ground, and said, "Alo, America," kissed the ground. And I think of how blessed all of us are to live in these free countries we live in, be they Canada or the United States, where we can do and say what we want, think what we want, react the way we want, and how close we are to coming to losing all of that.
That is just such an amazing story. And I understand that in 1987, you did it again. Didn't you rescue your 18-year-old cousin and bring her from Lithuania?
Yes, I had wanted to get her and her brother out because when my mother went over to visit, she saw the kids, and they were in what's it called, an internatus, they say. It's a state school, because their mother was unfortunately an alcoholic, and her maternal rights were taken away from her. But let me tell you something, Harvey. If I had to live under Soviet boot heel, I would have been the premier alcoholic. It was the only joyous thing you had. The only warmth you had was to throw a homemade vodka down. I understood that. Alcoholism ran rampant in the Soviet Union because it was a touch of warmth. And it took you out of your miseries for a few seconds. Everything was gray and overcast and dirty. And I mean, they didn't have dry cleaning. They didn't have laundries. They didn't have washing machines. So you know what kind of odors we alone, even after we take baths, how we are. And hell, I was in a fancy hotel the first time I was there in Lithuania that provided hot water once a week. Tell me how good living under communism is, where everybody's equal, but somehow some are just a little more equal.
Well, in 2019, you had your Lithuanian citizenship restored, and you received Lithuania's highest honor from the president at the presidential palace. You must be so proud to be honored by the country of your heritage, Ruta.
I am. And what's more, not only was that just a dream come true, it was absolutely fabulous, but I'm also happy to tell you that when we first came to the United States, I had to renounce what was my Canadian citizenship. And now I have it back, thank you, God. Isn't that great? So now I have my Canadian citizenship as well. So the maple leaf shines in my life and my heart forever.
And you shine in ours.
Thank you. That's a lovely thing to say. I'm dying to come home and do a play or a show or something in Toronto. You have great theater in Toronto. And I'm thinking it's time that one of your Canadian producers woke up to the fact that I still walk and talk and sing and dance and do, and I should be doing movies and things being shot in Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver, wherever. Remember, folks, I'm a Canadian citizen.
Well, let me tell you, Ruta, when you come back to Toronto, and you will, I'm going to host the welcome back party for you like you've never seen.
Now, I want to extend an ongoing, never to be revoked invitation that if you come this way, darling Harvey, know that you have an open invitation. You have my phone number. You know where to find me. Please, please, please come. I'll buy you a glass or 10 of wine or Canadian Club or whatever you want.
Well, you know, I would love you to sign my book.
I will do that.
You know, Ruta, for almost 60 years, you served along with Debbie Reynolds in a leadership role in the Thalians, known as Hollywood for Mental Health, which is a monumentally important organization promoting mental health from pediatrics to geriatrics, as you love to say. You've received many awards and tributes for your work with this organization. And it seems like with what we've all been through over the last year and a half, mental health is even more important now than ever before, don't you think?
Oh, my Lord. It, first of all, there have always been mental health problems, but they were not talked about very much. Think about it, Harvey. It's always been the hidden disease. It's always been the disease that got shoved in the closet that nobody in the family wanted to talk about. And along came the Thalians, and we chose mental health as our impetus to do something to give back. You know, the Thalians was founded by a group of young Hollywood types, including the wondrous Debbie Reynolds. And they got tired of being called pot smoking jerk-offs that had nothing to contribute, you know, hard drinking, carousing. And they said, you know, we need to support something. We get together and let's sell tickets and do that. So they sent out Jane Mansfield and Mamie Van Doren. Now, you want to talk about bazooms? They led through the door everywhere. And they came back to the meeting and said, well, all the good diseases have been taken. And so the only thing that they could find, but that we really espoused, was a doctor who dealt with emotionally disturbed children, which he described the child as similar to a rotting apple in a barrel. Unless you take out that apple and cut away the problems, you're going to infect the entire barrel, in this case, the entire community. So we took that on. And 18 years later, after doing spectacular all-star shows honoring the most glittering people in Hollywood, we raised enough money to build the Thalians Community Mental Health Center, which was the first building that went in at the huge Cedars-Sinai complex in Los Angeles. And then some 50 odd years later, 55 years later, we said, you know, we're overlooking something very important, and that is the returning veterans, those beautiful young people that we send all over the world to stand up for us, to do what's right, and they come back maimed and injured, and especially when it comes to mental health, they come back in dire need of help, and somehow they fall through the cracks. And we Thalians, who had been shining a spotlight on mental illness, had not really focused on the returning veterans. So we decided to switch our focus. And we now teamed up with UCLA's Operation Mend. UCLA's Operation Mend tries to heal the broken bodies, the fractured and broken bones. We Thalians try to heal the fractured and broken mind and therefore spirit. And so to anybody, whether it's $5 or 50 cents or $500,000, if you have it and you're of a mind, please go to the Thalians, THALIANS.org, and you can read a message from Debbie, my sister in charity, my beloved friend, from me. You'll see what we're doing and how we've done it all through the years. And just know that if you send me anything for my charity, consider your ass kissed.
And that is a most worthwhile organization and cause. You know, Ruta, I'm so amazed by your energy and your commitment to civic duty. You served as commissioner on the Los Angeles Board of Environmental Quality and as a member of the Economic Development Board. You were a national spokesperson for the American Cancer Society. You were honored as Woman of the Year by B'nai B'rith. You received the prestigious Yellow Rose of Texas from President George W. Bush. Where do you find the energy and the time to do everything you do?
Well, Harvey, I think I will go back to my God-given Lithuanian roots, a tremendous energy that exists there, you know, the peasant stock that I'm from, and an absolute strong work ethic. And I feel that if I have been blessed with a talent and a use for it and something I love to do, and then get paid at the end of the week for it. Wow, how much more can I ask for in life? And I am blessed. And therefore, it is incumbent upon me and anybody in this industry or any industry that you might be happy in to give back or forward, in many cases, for those to be able to help themselves that can't do it on their own. And so Thalians became my cause celeb, although I am very, very reticent about saying no to anything that I'm asked to do if it's important. And everything is important to somebody. It has been so gratifying to have somebody walk up, you know, if Debbie and I were having supper out somewhere, somebody would walk up and say, forgive us for interrupting, but I've got to tell you, you have no idea of what a change this made in my son's life. Or somebody will come along and say, my mother was in the rehab at the Thalians. You don't know what it's done. Or my drug-induced life changed because of Thalians. That is the biggest pat on the back that you could possibly hope for. And that buoys the spirits. And I cannot help but think that doing good for somebody else means you're doing more for yourself than you realize.
Well, I think when you said that you were born with a gift and a talent, there's no mistaking that, but you were born with an enormous heart.
Thank you. I hope I felt that way. My father was very gregarious and would give you the shirt off his back if that made you happy. My mother was a touch more conservative, but she'd give you her blouse off her back too. But you had to be worthy of it.
I want all of our viewers in the Palm Springs area to know that Miss Ruta Lee will be doing a book signing this Sunday, May the 30th, at the Just Fabulous bookstore in Palm Springs from 2 to 4 p.m. Ruta, as you know, I'm in Toronto, but like I said, I will be in Los Angeles this summer to film some shows, and I will absolutely get in touch with you because I really want you to sign my book.
Well, I am so looking forward to meeting you in person. I feel like we're new, old best friends.
I do too. Now, for those of you who do not live in the Palm Springs area, you can order an autographed copy of Ruta Lee's book from the historic Larry Edmonds bookstore by going online to www.larryedmonds.com. Well, Ruta, I want to thank you with all my heart for sharing this time with me and my viewers. We all know that your work will live on forever, but more importantly, your generosity of spirit, your kindness, your compassion have made you an enduring and beloved celebrity for all time. Thank you so much for being on my show.
I am so honored that you asked me and are sharing your beautiful audience with me. And so all I can do, Harvey, is say, may God continue to smile on you, all your viewers, and please, God, smile a little bit some more on me for a few more years. Will you, darling God? Thank you so much, sweetheart.
My viewers and I wish you the best of health and happiness, the best of luck with the book. We look forward to seeing you making a movie or a show up here in Toronto. Please come back to our show anytime you want. You're always welcome.
Is tomorrow too soon?
Not at all. Our guest has been the fabulous Ruta Lee. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Remember to subscribe to the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. And be sure to check out more great interviews with Harvey Brownstone on harveybrownstoneInterviews.com.